Hello, everybody, and welcome to the show. I have with me a fast friend and a former interviewer who has now become the interviewee. I have Eron Mazza on the show. Hello, Eron.
Hello.
Hello, hello. So, Eron Mazza, I think most people watching this have probably heard of you, and if not, they should have seen the episode a couple of weeks ago where you had me on your show. But for those who don't know
hmm
you, Eron Mazza, they, them, is a witch activist and podcaster. They are a dedicant of the Anderson Feri tradition and hosts The Witching Hour with Eron Mazza, a mindgarden media podcast in association with Screw You Todd Productions. As we get through our episode today, we will flesh out more about who you are. So, how are you doing, Eron? How are you?
I'm doing okay. We are moving into summer down
Yes,
here
we
in
are.
St. Louis, and so it's pretty established that the farther south you go, the more humid it gets. And so, just to make it less fancy, are we allowed to swear on this podcast?
Yes, we are. Yes, you are.
Just to make it simple as bitch, it's hot.
Yes.
Like go
Yeah.
home and you got to change your underwear on your lunch break type of hot.
Honestly, it is hot up here in Ontario too. My viewers on YouTube are lucky that we're wearing shirts at the moment.
Well, I'm kind of wearing like three quarters of a shirt, so
Love
but
it.
I'm comfortable, and that's all that matters.
That is, especially at this time of night. We're recording on a Friday night. This will be viewed on a Tuesday, but we're hanging out on a Friday night here, and we need to be comfortable. It's TGIF right now.
TGIF. I
Mhm.
got my little drink. I've got my little whiskey and coke, and I am ready to go.
Wonderful. Okay, so complete transparency. I had not heard of you except I had seen you on some mutual friends posts, but I had not heard of you until you reached out a couple of months ago. And it's funny how small the community really is because we found out we had some mutual closer friends. Well, mutual friends, mutual acquaintances. Because you're originally from Oklahoma, aren't you?
Correct.
Yeah.
Sooner born and sooner bred. It's a college back home, and when I die, I'll be sooner reincarnated. Not
You'll never be able
that's
to
not
escape.
part of it originally.
So you're originally from Oklahoma. You've made your way up to Missouri. So what brought you to Missouri?
My ex-husband, we were married for
Mm,
12 years. We're still friends.
mhm,
Had retired from the military,
mm,
and he was originally from Ohio. And Ohio is a beautiful state. Love the scenic scenery. Toledo is pretty good, but I couldn't deal with Ohio. That's too far
mm,
south. I mean, too far
mm.
north and just a little too cold for me. And I wanted to go down to New Orleans to be near my cousins and my friends. And we compromised on St. Louis because we had already had like friends and community here because he was actually stationed at an Air Force base just a few miles outside of St. Louis.
Wow.
And so that's how I ended up here. And it was quite serendipitous that we are here. We made all the right connections,
Mhm.
all the right friends, and yeah, that's how I ended up in St. Louis.
Wow. I'll be honest, the only kind of reference I have of St. Louis is the video game Defiance and the TV show. But that arch, and like I know it's a huge city, like it's a huge, really cosmopolitan city. But that's the only reference point I have of it. What was it like for you to kind of settle and put roots down in St. Louis?
The thing about it was different because just the energy of the city is different. Where I'm from, everybody's friendly. You say good morning to people like passing by on the street, and you ask people are doing. You have conversations at restaurants with like other people at other tables, and then like excuse me, you come up here and there's just people there's just people uh just ignoring the existence of the other person, and that was just so foreign to me. I lived in culture shock for about
Mhm.
4 months, and then I decided, you know what, I'm just going to be obnoxiously nice. Just like I always am, nice and enduring. And that's one of the things people say is you're so nice. I'm like, that is the one compliment that should never happen, because
Yes,
we should just be nice to each other naturally.
it's
And
true.
also you see a lot up here that I didn't think I would see is like the issue of racism is worse. whenever you come up here. But that's like the history, because St. Louis is a really old city. And in just some of that racism goes back generations and generations and generations, and you just start to see it. It's just now starting to get deprogrammed, and I'm glad I'm up here for it, because it's something that should have been undone a long time ago. Damn it, something that shouldn't even be happened in the first place. But we just have to move forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And well, and we were talking beforehand, you're part of that moving forward process. You're actually, as an activist, you're quite active in the community down there, the queer community, and the community in general. You're actually organizing or helping to organize a protest tomorrow, right?
Yes, I am leading a
Yeah.
protest rally because Pride is kicking off down here,
Mhm.
and it is especially important. This Pride is especially important because there's people in power down here who think the queer community shouldn't exist, and they want to govern, they want to legislate their morality. And morality, what they don't realize, is not a universal thing. Morality is a plural thing.
Mhm.
It's respective of each person, but they think their way is right. And there is no room in their myopic and tiny perception of the world for people like me, for people like you, and
Mhm.
people like a lot of our listeners out there. And I will always take a stand against those people,
Yeah.
because what it comes down to is I will always stand up against tyrannical religion, no
Mhm.
no matter no matter what symbol it's under. When you start to try, the last time that they mixed religion and politics, people got burned at the stake, and I'll be damned if that's going to happen while I'm still alive.
It's becoming increasingly scary what's happening, and so quickly too. So quickly, these things have flared up so quickly. The moral panic of the majority or so-called majority, and this year's the trans community. 10 years ago, it was a gay community, and so on and so on. It's funny. I've always acknowledged how powerful witchcraft is to the queer community. But when you
Mm-hmm.
really look at specific times like now, you see how it becomes an empowering piece. Um, what was it like for you coming into the community and then starting to identify as a witch? How how connected was your queer identity to that?
And 25, I will start off this story with
Okay.
the number 25, because 25 is the same year I came out of the closet. And it's also the same year I left seminary and Bible study
Mm,
and took up witchcraft. And one of the questions that I was asked by a local magazine when I was being interviewed was, how did witchcraft even get on the buffet of options? And the answer is simple: I read the Bible. I read it from cover to cover. And once you get outside of all the brainwashing and all the programming and stuff that they put people through, you begin to say, maybe those witches and mystics had it right. And maybe there's just a issue of jealousy. I'm trying really hard right now to keep my bias against like organized religion out of this, but it's something that has left deep scars on me, and it's something that
mm,
I just see starting to pop up. And like I
mhm.
said a few seconds ago, and it is literally trying to take people's lives away.
Absolutely.
And I feel like that, like we as witches and magical practitioners, it's magic has always been the equalizer for the oppressed,
Mhm.
where they had wealth, they have weapons, they have everything else. We have the universe, the goddess, the gods, whatever you choose to call it. We have that on our side, and that is always going to be the equalizer for the oppressed. I rely very heavily on the gospel of the witches,
Mhm.
and with Aradia and her whole story.
Mhm.
There's
And
like
that
a and like I said, it's like it's because that whole story is about the goddess Diana sending her daughter to Earth. I'm going to give you all the nutshell version because I'm sure you've read it. And if not, you should pick it up. It's
you
really
should
great.
definitely.
And it's about learning how to use magic to throw off your oppressors.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's a component of the story which, when you look at most of the witch stories around at least Europe, but also other parts of the world, it's that throwing off of the oppressors, finding power, empowerment again, right? Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. There's also another witch that you're really strongly connected with, which is Striganona, isn't she? Isn't it?
Oh yes. Oh yes. I
Yeah.
love me some Stregonona. I just did another show and I did like my first audio book, I guess you could say. And I read the
Ooh.
entire first book of Stregonona
Oh,
from
what was that
it
like?
was that was that felt gave me a lot of the warm and fuzzies, and I felt like it really realigned a lot of my moral compasses because it's a
Mm-hmm.
thing. It's a lot of the things that I try to reflect in my craft,
Mm-hmm.
and I did it on the show. It was storybook, the lore of the ancient lore of witchcraft, and forgive me
Mm-hmm.
if I've butchered the title, but it's a great show hosted by great folks, and but it really gave me a chance to show like a lot of my pillars, the pillars of my own craft and my own tradition. And if you look at Stregonona, she took care of the people in the town. She even took care of the priest, and the sisters of the convent would come to her and seek her out. And I feel like that's how we're supposed to be. We're supposed to be people who help people with their ailments, help people with
Yeah.
their issues, not carry them, not
Mm-hmm.
take them on ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
but we are supposed to be there for people who don't have anyone else to be there for them.
Oh, my mind is kind of blowing right now because when you really think about kind of well, a lot of the people on my podcast this summer are queer. A lot of them practitioners are queer. I think I've only got like two straight people on in the entire summer, which is that wasn't intentional, just how it happened to be. But well, maybe it was a little intentional. But when you think about how queer people's role, at least in Western society, has been, it's often been relegated to those places of support, of caring, of caretaking, of entertainment, right? Those safe
Mm-hmm.
places that people can go and relieve themselves, right? I have a lot of feelings on that myself, but it's just reality of what it is. So what you just said there about witches and witchcraft being that place of taking care of the community, I think it makes sense why so many queer people would find themselves in witchcraft.
Mm-hmm. But it's
Mhm.
even just kind of like being able and being comfortable to move outside of the queer community. It's being able to take it out onto the main street. And yeah, it's going to scare people, but there's a difference between the kind of fear you instill. There's a fear that where there's those people who don't want to understand, willful ignorance,
Mhm.
and then there are people with just regular ignorance who want to understand.
Yes.
And sadly, right now, the people who are willfully ignorant are the people who have the loudest voice. There's not many of them, but they are able to work a lot of people into a frenzy because they're really loud.
Absolutely, absolutely. So how does your witchcraft then come into your work as an activist? What are the connections there?
To me, witchcraft has always been intersectional with activism. Like I said earlier, is the witches and the magical practitioners were always people who lived on the outskirts of the city because a lot of people in my mind couldn't handle what they represented. They represented anti-establishment. They represented going against the power. They represented true care and true love and true protection. To me, witchcraft is that wall between letting the powerful step over the weak. We are the hedge riders, and at the same time we are the hedge.
Right, right. It's true. No, it's true. So how does that relate back to your story? Let's go back to you at 25. Maybe I hope this doesn't turn into a counseling session. I'm not trying to
Oh
counsel.
no. And I'm very I have a lot of closure. I have a lot of closure from dealing with
Yeah.
that. And it's just kind of like I grew up in a very, very, very religious state.
Hmm.
And I just saw the way that like the church was keeping queer people from getting married. Religion was keeping queer people from passing laws allowing doctors and medical personnel to deny treatment to LGBTQ people. It's like once I got out of that, it's like the blinders were taken off, and I see the way that these people use this book of fables to control other people, and that would never ever work. Let's
Hmm.
say I walk in there with I was going to see if I had it behind me on my bookshelf with the Gospel of Aradia,
Yeah.
and I'm like, we should just destroy all the rich people. We should
Hmm.
just do this. We should do that. We should make it the law. We should consecrate rocks and everything else. And that's it.
Mhm.
I just saw the way that they just hid behind this book that I had dedicated so much of my life to, and they just used it to brainwash people. I'm like, that's not faith. That is literal mind control. And my witchcraft is all about deprogramming that. It's all
Absolutely.
about being the virus, being a positive virus, and getting people to think for themselves.
Mhm.
Sexuality is not scary.
Mhm.
Your body is not scary.
Mhm.
It's just kind of like deprogramming that, so that way we as a civilization and
Mhm.
we as a country can not be scared of our own power. Because
Mhm.
one of the things they teach, if you read, is don't do witchcraft, don't do this, don't kneel to any other gods, don't kneel to your own self-awareness, because we're just always taught from a very young age in these circles to fear our own power.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's, I mean, that's not just one small branch of Christianity. That's most of branches of Christianity. Again, not dumping on that one religion, but the way that the power in society that it wields itself. Absolutely. So for you, then, what was the determining factor? Like going through seminary, being involved in this. What was the kind of the
Catalyst.
yes? What was the catalyst?
It's I was driving down I-40
Mhm.
in Oklahoma, going out to my mom's property to go feed some animals, and I just couldn't contain these feelings. I was attracted to men, and I just had this moment where I was like, I'm either going to be happy or I'm going to die. So I picked to be happy. And to me, the worst thing on the planet is somebody who cannot be happy because they can't be themselves. That's
Mm,
just the same as dying to me.
yeah.
And it's because you might as well already be in your coffin, because you're already hiding yourself from the world anyway.
Right.
And so I left the seminary, I left the church, and the first book I picked, friends who practiced in high school.
Mhm.
And I was curious about that. And I started thinking about that circle of friends who were always really nice to me, even though I didn't share their faith. And
Mhm.
even though I was at some points very cruel to them,
Mm,
I went and picked up a copy of Scott Cunningham's
mm,
Wicca for the Solitary Practitioner. And that was the very first book I ever picked up on witchcraft. And
yeah.
the rest is history.
And the rest is history. I think we talked about that actually in your in on your show when I was on there. I think we were talking about kind of our first books and what our first books were. That was singular book. It seemed like that launched 1,000 careers. It seemed like it was such a. I think it's underrated now, but it was hugely important back then, wasn't it?
It was, and sometimes I like to think, what if Scott Cunningham was still alive today?
Yeah,
Just where he would be at, and just what he would be doing with the
yeah,
community, and with especially with the LGBTQ community and what's
absolutely.
going on today.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's something I didn't actually know. I didn't know about him that he was part of a community. Because his book was never like I think I finally got a copy of his book, but it was never my first book. So I actually didn't know that he was part of a queer community himself.
Yeah, he wrote that, and he wrote like an entire book on minerals and
Mhm.
plants and kitchen witchery and
Yes.
all kinds of stuff. He was a big contributor until he passed. I think it was in the late 1980s to early 1990s,
Mhm.
whenever the HIV
Yeah.
epidemic was really happening. He passed in that.
Yeah. It's an incredible it's incredible that a member of our community had such an impact on the community at large, right?
It
Yeah.
is just one person influenced so many different people.
Yeah. So coming back to you, it's all about you tonight, Erin. It's all about you tonight.
Yeah.
Okay, we just took a little break because Erin's internet was acting up, but we are back now. So, Erin, I'm curious then. So, 25, you went to witchcraft, and you were practicing. What tradition were you practicing back then? Because you weren't part of fairy tradition yet, were you?
No, I was not. I had not discovered it. I was just being eclectic. I was going around reading all these different books and blogs, and I was definitely in the beginning witch phase. I wanted all the candles. I wanted all the crystals. I wanted everything. I was a veritable occult sponge. And I just wanted to soak up as much knowledge as I could, but that was really before I learned to pace myself.
Mm-hmm.
And I was very eclectic, and I tried a whole bunch of different things until I found the glove that fit. And I dabbled around with like Southern root work and conjure and other traditions, and it really took me on a lot of adventures to find
Mm-hmm.
my place. And I feel like in the tradition I'm at now, it's kind of like I've found a spiritual home.
We're gonna get to that because that is a whole like story, an epic, a saga in itself of kind
It
of how you
is.
you came up. So let's skip ahead. I'm not gonna date you, but let's say skip ahead a decade ish um, to 2020. So the pandemic hits. So you survived without COVID for a while, and then you got COVID. Can you tell
It
us a little bit
did.
about that?
Yes, I
Yeah.
am. It was July 2020,
Hmm.
and I was working at a local hardware superstore,
Hmm.
and it was like masks. Everybody was mad. There was lines wrapped around the building, and I'm like, this is good though, because we're avoiding getting sick. Because I'm very susceptible. Excuse me. Whew. I'm very acceptable to things like respiratory infections. And guess what COVID was? A respiratory infection. Until one night I got done washing my car and I was like, ooh, I don't feel right. And then I took my temperature and I was sitting at a 101 temperature. And I just knew, I was like, oh, guess whose luck ran out? And it's like as the day progressed and the night progressed, I just got sicker and sicker and sicker to the point where I ended up in the hospital. And at that point, I ended up dealing with a temperature that was 105 degrees. I was in and out of consciousness, didn't know up from down. I was hallucinating. It was just the thing I went through in 2020 was just something I wouldn't even wish on my worst enemy. I had like this rash. I was covered from head to toe. I was incoherent. One of my friends who I was rooming with at the time is a local journalist, and actually there is a picture of me passed out in bed because
Right.
I weighed 215 pounds the time I got it. And by the time I recovered almost 2 to 3 weeks later, I was down to 180.
Wow. Wow, that's incredible. That's incredible. And I think you've posted. I think you've posted that picture somewhere too, haven't you? It's quite yeah,
Every year I always post the picture because it
yeah,
always just reminds me that, like, in spite of what other people have said, that the pandemic wasn't a hoax.
yeah.
And because
Mm-hmm.
I've sort of become like a poster child for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. When
And yeah, uh, and it's just kind of like I went through a strange initiation. I had a near death experience.
Mhm.
And I just feel like that whole instance right there just changed the trajectory of my life because my roommates were literally making plans about what to do with all my stuff if I died.
Right. Yeah, because that would have been just before the vaccine. I like old timey wimey. I've lost track of when the vaccine came out, but we definitely didn't have a vaccine in July of that
Mm-mm.
year. No.
No, they couldn't do anything for you in the hospitals. All they could
Yeah,
do was treat the
exactly.
symptoms. They couldn't beat the virus because it's a new
Yeah,
virus because it was a new virus at the time.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah. So
And
you,
I just felt like my craft was changing. I felt like my energy is changing. I felt like instead, like we as witches, like I said, we're hedge walkers, but I feel like I did a little bit more than just walk on the hedge. It's like I fell over the other end for a second.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. When it was happening to you and you were recovering afterwards, you had a very profound paradigm shift. What was that like for you? What happened?
It's kind of hard to explain what happened, but it's just like I felt like I was in touch. It's like kind of like I said, my energy changed, and I felt like my energy was a little more ecstatic, and it was a little more frantic. It's kind of like your these witchy abilities that like you have of divination and like your
Mm,
witchcraft skills. It's like I developed like different ones that just came back stronger after this.
right.
And I was part of a wonderful community. I'm still part of the wonderful community, but I actually was studying in this community to to be able to be a priest dix one day.
Oh, wow.
And then I changed over to the Anderson Feri tradition, which is a little more ecstatic. It's more artistic. It is definitely very sex. It's also, just like most witchcraft traditions, very sex positive, but it just had the flavor I was looking for and the flavor I needed at that time to show me how to interact with the world around me. The way the disease taught me a different way to interact with my reality after COVID.
It's
And it's given me the skills, and it's given me a bit more the discipline.
a little bit more of a discipline. I love that. The first time I read about it and you told me about it, and I looked at some of the posts on your socials about it. What struck me was it had all the hallmarks of what any of the shamanic traditions around the world. I hate that word, but it's really the only animistic traditions. But like shamans in Siberia. Speaking about oftentimes being initiated because of death, because of going through a sickness, and the only way to be saved is to initiate and put yourself down. It sounds like a very similar process you went through. Is that kind of how you're conceptualizing it, or like?
That is how I would say it. Like that moment right there is when I was
Mhm.
passing away. It's like I passed away to like old traditions, old thoughts, old thought forms, and it's like I came back to life, and it's into the fairy tradition. It's like I heard the fairy tradition calling me after I went through that whole process, and I didn't ignore the call.
You didn't ignore the call. Yeah. How did you become aware of it then? So you said you weren't really aware of it beforehand, and I know I know some of the traditions you were a part of. It would have been completely out of that sphere. How did you become aware of it then, fairy tradition?
I am friends with a lot of practitioners. I'm friends with a lot of initiates who
Mm.
practice the fairy tradition. And it's like something in my heart was like, hey, come over here.
Mm.
Give us a try. We want to help you. And here I am 2 or 3 years later, 20, about 3 years later,
About 3 years later, yeah.
into my training. And it's just like, it's something that kind of fit like a very comfortable shoe that you had broken in.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, this is beautiful. Oh, and some of the traditional elements of the tradition very different from, say, like even eclectic Wicca. Very different kind of way of looking at the world. For those who don't know anything about it, how would you explain Anderson Ferry?
I would explain the Anderson Feri tradition as a tradition of creativity. Like I said, it's a very artistic inclined tradition. One of my close friends, Storm Fairy Wolf,
Hmm.
which is the lineage that I'm studying under,
Oh,
uh,
okay. Hmm.
looks at it this way: it is everything that is secret and fairy can fit on a note card, and but it's a very expressive path. It's a very transparent path. It's a very ecstatic path, and I like that. And because I guess it's also because I dealt a lot with dogma and ritual and stuff like that in my younger life. And then vroom, here comes the fairy tradition with like ecstatic traditions and dancing and movement and expression. It encourages you to express yourself. And I think that's kind of like another aspect of healing that I was really looking for.
Absolutely, absolutely. What have you learned about yourself in the past 3 years? What have you noticed about yourself coming out?
I have noticed I've started developing a lot more boundaries with relationships,
Mhm.
because for a while it's just like I would let people step in my boundaries. I didn't have boundaries, but I also learned about my limits, and I've learned to honor my limits, but I've also learned to honor my strengths and to find strengths that like I never had before.
Mhm.
Like I've also learned that there's no danger in just being truthful with people. You don't have to put on airs for anybody. If somebody doesn't like pure adulterated you, they're really not going to like you if you put up a wall and they find out about you later. So you might as well just be honest now. There is a magic and transparency that happens.
Normalizing yourself.
Yes.
Yeah,
And
normalizing yourself.
if people aren't ready for the transparency of who you are, I mean, it's not like I make it sound like I'll just like burp and fart in front of people, but I let people know about me whenever we first meet. I tell them that I am an honest person. I'm a compassionate person. I'll do things for people, but don't abuse it. And I will
Mhm,
tell you whenever you're abusing it. And I
mhm,
used to be so timid about speaking up for myself and speaking up for other people because I was scared of their reaction. But now, 3 years later in Fairy, I'm like, fuck your reaction. I really don't care. It's like, I'm right here.
yeah.
What are you gonna do? It's like I've already almost died once. I've been on death's door. What more can you do to me?
It's a good question, right? It really is. I love that. I love that. I think that I'm hoping that that speaks to a lot of listeners because it's been my perception that a lot of people who come into witchcraft and pagan spirituality, they're often coming, well, not so much with really really young people now, but like there's a generation that have come because of religious trauma, and
Mm-hmm.
then they find this amazing place that they suddenly can find themselves in and fill the void with, and the masks go on,
Mm-hmm.
right? That
And it's
conversion
just
syndrome,
yes, that's what I was about to say because
Mhm.
you're just taught so much in these paths and in these Abrahamic religions. They want you to be in a box. They want you to, like I said, be scared of your own body, be scared of your power, be scared of thinking for yourself because they know if because people in power understand if people realized that we
Mhm.
had the ability to recreate the world in our own image, they would not have any of the pull and they wouldn't be enjoying the benefits that they're having right now. They
Mhm.
wouldn't be able to play both sides of the aisle like they are.
Yeah.
And if people just woke up and realized that what's going on here is the reason that people want us to fight with one another is just to keep us off balance.
Mhm.
I'm going to get off my soapbox and out of my conspiracy theory box, but it's just how I perceive things. People in power, if they keep us divided, they are frightened.
And this is why marginalized communities exist in the first place, because we
Mm-hmm.
challenge those status quo, which is really challenging the status quo of a tiny minority in itself, but a minority that has decided we hold all the power. We get to say what the status quo is. We get to mark everybody else by our standards and compare and contrast and blah blah blah, all of that, right? Yeah, and dictate to other people how they live their lives.
And they get to dictate history, as you see what's
Yeah.
going on down here in the States. Is
Oh,
you have these people who want to pretend like slavery happened, it never
yeah.
happened, who
Never
want to pretend
happened.
like
Yeah.
the genocide of indigenous peoples never happened, the
Mhm.
genocide and the persecution of LGBTQ individuals, and the continued persecution of racial minorities. It's these are the people who write history, and and they are writing it in the blood of minorities.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then we wonder why culture wars are always about narrative and story and symbol, because representation matters, right? I was thinking about this
Mm-hmm.
while driving the other day. People our generation, our age, we're closer to age. Some of our major kind of figures back in the 90s and early 2000s, people like Harry Potter, people like Sabrina the Teenage Witch, figures like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, all of these like strong independent witch type figures, who were outside but also outside of the norm, but fighting for the good. How
Mm-hmm.
many of them created a moral panic back in the day, right? Like
Every one of them.
every single one of them. Yeah, same with
And
D&D, right?
yeah, they're terrified of why are you scared of I have Dungeons and Dragons. One of
Yeah.
the things that just blew my mind is watching these grown ass white men freak out because Ariel, the fictitious mermaid, was being portrayed by a black woman. Who cares?
Yeah.
She's fictitious and she's giving people something to look up to. She's giving people out there who never had representation,
Mhm.
who never had someone to look at the screen and go, "Oh wow, that person's like me." You know, uh, these people are freaking out. What I think it comes from is again willful ignorance,
Mhm.
and it is also coming from a realization that the world is starting to shrink, And
Yes.
so these people are just digging their heels in and they don't want to change.
Yeah,
But the way they're doing things is killing the world, literally.
it's true. It's true. They're not even caring about the next generation. They're only caring about what they have now. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's funny. I was reading something. I've been working through a stack of traditional witchcraft books, and I was reading H. Byron Ballard's book on Appalachia, and they make the same comment. They talk about how all of these people have come to that specific region and haven't cared about the place because all they saw are resources, money that could be made, overlay, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then we have social issues that result because of that. And I think that's the connection point between kind of the community and the rest of us, right? Taking care of each other. I think perhaps that's why these Republicans and these conservatives are so fearful. One of the many reasons, anyways, of the queer community is that the queer community have created a community to take care of each other, despite all of those attacks.
Yeah, it's a community now that is
Yeah.
not as easily exploited as they're used to.
Mm.
And it's just, and a lot of communities are starting to become very unexploitable, and that's freaking the old guard out. That
Yeah.
is, they're like, uh-oh, they're onto us. So let's start doing this over here so we can distract them and start doing this over here. It's kind of like this hand starting to do something to distract from really what's going on over here.
Absolutely. And it's funny because we're now seeing a lot of material coming in to the witchcraft community and the pagan community around activism specifically. I'm thinking of like David Salisbury's book. A couple of years ago, there was the Hex Trump book. I can't think what
Mm-hmm.
it was. You remember it? Yeah, yeah,
I do. I think I have
yeah.
it sitting here on my shelf.
Yeah.
Bind Trump or something like that.
It's something like that. It's like, witchcraft for, for the rest of us or something like that, right? Yeah. So what do you think is a way that people who are feeling overwhelmed but have witchcraft as their disposal at their disposal, what do you think that they can do in less of a kind of all neurals and I can't think what I'm trying to say here. What do you think? What are some of the practical ways that witchcraft can help people in being activists and being and making a change in the world?
The best way to make a change in the world is to pay attention to what's going on in your city and your state, because change happens at a local level.
Mhm.
You can't just dive in head first on a global scale. You have to start on a smaller scale. Start with what's going on with your city. It could even start with just being a nice person. Saying
Mhm.
please and thank you is the best way to start. Make eye contact when you're talking to people. Honor the humanity in other people, because respect and kindness is the best form of magic. And it is literally something that I always believe. Respect, kindness, and empathy are what saves the world eventually one day. Because one day this old guard is going to run out of steam, and people who think like me and like you and a lot of the listeners out there are going to pick it up, and we're going to be ready whenever that happens to save the world with empathy, compassion, respect, and kindness.
I agree. I agree wholeheartedly.
So
What
to
I
answer that question a little more succinct is be kind. Be
be
kind to
kind.
one another.
Yeah.
Love one another. See the humanity. Quit looking at people for what they can do for you, and start looking at people as people.
Love yourself.
Yeah, and see what you can do for you, and also love yourself.
Hmm.
That's also the most important. You got to have respect for yourself if you're going to truly even just enjoy life. Honor your boundaries, honor your strengths, but also honor your weaknesses. And you let a motherfucker know whenever they start trying to exploit those weaknesses. Don't be scared to speak up. And yes, I just dropped the MF bomb.
It's okay. This is after hours. It's okay.
It is, and don't be scared, because I have gotten to that point now where I will tell somebody like, "You're really making me uncomfortable." So,
Mm.
and they have one of two reactions: I'm sorry, or they just get madder.
Yeah, no, it's true. No, that's the defenses come up, right? Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. it's interesting when that happens, isn't it? When you erect a boundary, and it may be to somebody who's never had to deal with a boundary with you before, and then
Mm-hmm.
that oh, I'm sorry, and then suddenly it's all, but it's all then becomes about them, right? It becomes an ego thing, right?
And you just see whenever you confront somebody about something that happened, it's like all that baggage they're holding, they just drop it. They
Yeah,
just it's just like two heavy bags, and either they're relieved by it or they're really angry because you have just messed with the matrix.
yeah. No, it's true. It's true. So here's a question for you, because I do want to get to talking about your podcast, but here's a question for
Mm-hmm.
you on that. So, as I said before, my observation, a lot of people come in with baggage to these communities. They suddenly find themselves in a space where they're given the ability of to do magic and study amazing pagan gods and myths and stories, and they have an alternative view, but they have this baggage. What would you suggest as somebody coming into our communities? Um, how can witchcraft help to alleviate that baggage? What do you think people should do?
One of the things that I always thought was really powerful when I was starting out was just finding good literature, finding a good
Yeah.
local metaphysical bookstore, because that's a great place to find a community. That's a great place to find like-minded people. But also, I am a big bibliophile. I love books. It's about being able to, like I said, find good literature. Start out with reading, start out with learning. Don't be so quick to try to jump into leadership roles or anything. Enjoy the
Mm-hmm.
time, enjoy the learning time.
Enjoy the learning.
Well, because once you get done with one bit of learning time, guess what? There's more learning time. Learning time is
It's true.
lifelong.
No, it's
And
true.
it's good to be the perpetual student.
And those are not cookbooks behind you. Those are all witchcraft books, aren't they?
They
Most of
are. They,
them.
they are. I have a little section up here that is that's like cookbooks and stuff, but that's about it. And this collection used to be a lot bigger.
Mhm. Oh, I feel that. I went through weeding mine as because I'm moving to the UK next year, right? And so I weeded out about, I'd probably say about 150 books easily.
Woo. And you
Yeah.
didn't ship me any?
I'm so sorry. Well, I have like I took them down to the local bookstore, got about $300 worth of credits, so I'll find you something nice.
No, no, no. I just as long as they help somebody else out. That's what it's all about at
Hope
the end of
so.
the day. You know,
Yeah.
this stuff can get lost in a fire, but it's about
Mhm.
the experiences. The best way to learn the witchcraft tradition is with tools you already have, is with this and
Yes.
working with
Yes.
this and with this right here.
Yes. Yes.
That is the most magical tool you own.
It's true. And community, right? Showing up
It,
with all of that for community
yes, showing up with all of that and having healthy boundaries.
and healthy
Boundaries
boundaries.
themselves, you
Yes.
don't need the most expensive grimoire. You don't need the most expensive magical tools. All you need is you and a trusted circle.
And a trusted circle, exactly. Yeah. Which is a good segue to what I want to ask you about your podcast. So,
Mhm.
Witching Hour with Eron Mazza, you are on the fourth season now?
I am. I
Oh, the
just
fourth
went into
season.
the
Oh,
fourth
yeah.
season,
That's
and I
exciting.
just started doing video too, so that's always fun. So now I actually have to put on a shirt whenever I talk to people.
You mean just after you've interviewed me, you're turning into a video type show? I'm shocked.
I
I'm
have a
shocked.
video of your podcast too, if you seem to forget, and I posted it on the Facebook.
Did you? Oh, okay. We'll talk about that afterwards. But
I couldn't hide a conversation with you away.
thank you. That's so sweet. Talk about community building, right? So, anyways, bringing it back to professionalism here. So your podcast, you started podcasts like 4 seasons ago. Looking at
Mhm.
the list of people now, I know like my publicist with Llewellyn works with you, sends you information all the time. You've talked to pretty much all the major people right now, a lot of them, anyways. So I want to ask you about the podcast. What kind of what why did it happen? What happened and how what have you learned about it or from it?
Before I started doing the podcast, I used to despise the sound of my own voice. I
Mm-hmm.
actually went through years and years of speech pathology and speech therapy because and I still deal with from time to time a speech impediment.
Little, yeah. Alicia,
And
right?
No, it's kind of like it was really weird. It was kind of like a lisp, and I used to have trouble with
Yeah.
W's and L's and just random letters.
Mhm.
And my friend Todd and Aunt Sandy,
And Sandy.
uh, yes, the
Handsome.
amazing producer Aunt Sandy, and who I make reference to often. I asked her the other day, so how's it feel to be known in the witchcraft community as Aunt Sandy and having a magical poncho? I base this all off one picture she posted online, and it looked like she had like a black and white sequency poncho on. And I'm like, it's a magical poncho. So every time somebody would come on, I'd be like, Aunt Sandy, by the powers of your magical poncho, please delete everything before this. And she was just like, I'm going to kill you.
And honestly, she sounds like she could probably kill you very easily too.
Oh, she is a veritable femme fatale. Uh, and I'm sure she'll probably kill me after saying that. And yep, I've already lost 2 of my 9 lives, and that's just because of you, Aunt Sandy. But what I have learned is kind of like I mentioned earlier, you don't have to put on airs. Maybe you talk to a lot of
Mm.
these
Yeah.
major authors and people
Yeah.
who are popular right now because they're people just like you.
Yeah.
And so then that tends to help people like that. It helps you get to the root of a lot of things with those people. That lets them
Mhm.
know that they don't have to put on a performance for you because it's a casual conversation. That's what the
Yeah.
podcast is. It's a casual conversation. I'm not here to grill you about where you were on the night of June 24th. Uh, I want to know about you. I want you to build personability with me. I want you to build personability with everybody else too. Because if you're
Mhm.
you're a writer, there's a degree of vulnerability involved.
Totally. Absolutely. Yeah, there is a vulnerability involved. As someone who's going through that process right now, I mean,
I was just about to say.
oh, thank you. But it's true. You know, I've not met a single writer unless they're like one of the ones who were in the 80s and they're now getting out there and all that. But every single person I've connected with, they've always said the same thing. The first book they wrote was the book that they had wished they had when they were younger, and they are just regular people living their life, right? Very few of the authors I've kind of come across start to believe their own Kool-Aid, right? And it's true. It is a very vulnerable thing though to put out a book and hope that people like it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just kind of like I'm sure you understand. It's kind of like it's like putting your heart between two pieces of paper essentially, and hoping people like your heart.
Yeah.
Whereas if I was in your position, it would probably be like behind the register at Barnes and Noble, up there with all the other adult books, because there would be a lot more obscenities in it. But sometimes that's just what people need, and that's my philosophy. Is
Mm-hmm.
you just got to be
Yeah.
straightforward with people, and that's what you do when you write a book. You're being as straightforward as you're comfortable being. It's giving a little bit of yourself that you've never put out there before for
Mm-hmm.
people to take.
Absolutely, absolutely, and podcasting too. Like I remember the first couple of times in interviews I did, I was hyper conscious of how many people were watching, what people would say, and of course nobody knew my podcast was there, so I didn't get any views. But what was it like for you when you first started to do your first couple of interviews? What was that like for you?
Kind of like you, I was very
Yeah.
hyper aware. I was
Mhm.
again worried about the sound of my own voice. Uh, and then after that, you just sort of relax.
Yeah.
It's like, look, you're talking to a total stranger. You're a little goofy, so use that. Disarm people so that way that they don't hide behind the wall.
Hmm. Hmm.
And my mission is to make you be as the more vulnerable you are, the more vulnerable I will be.
Makes sense. And looking at the list of the first couple of episodes, these are people that you knew quite well. My understanding, like you had Storm on, you had David Salisbury on, Devin
Mm-hmm.
Hunter, who is like I've not met David through Devin, like I only texted with Devin, but all of the interviews I've seen of him, he just brings people like right out of any kind of anxiety or anything like that.
He Devin is very I liked interviewing Devin and Storm and David because like you said, I've known them for a long time.
Yeah.
But Devin, I've seen Devin speak at conventions and other places, and he just has this innate warmth, and he has this innate personability that it's just kind of like Wow, I don't feel nervous when I'm talking to you. I feel like I'm talking to somebody else who likes to eat Taco Bell or macaroni and cheese. And you're a person just like me. And that is the sign, to me, that is the knack of a good author. That is a knack of a good anything where you can be vulnerable with people.
Mhm. I've been really enjoying Devon's podcast with Nicholas Pearson. I can't forget what it's called now.
Oh,
Oh,
Nicholas.
Stoned with Nicholas and Devon. That's right.
It'd be kind of funny if they were actually stoned while they did it.
I mean, I'm looking at their eyes very, very closely, and there's no red in there. So, but that would be quite funny, and maybe another after-hour show. You should produce that. Approach them both and produce that. I think they would be very, very, very funny, both stoned.
Just call it high witchcraft.
I'm not editing this out, by the way. I'm not editing any of this out. This is good.
That's okay. I have people already know I'm an ass, and I have no problem with that. And it's kind. I joked around with Ian Chambers at one point, and I'm like, dude, we should totally just get drunk off our asses and do drunk occult history,
Oh, that would be funny. That would be funny. Oh, that
and
would
just
be.
have like guests come on and have them get schnockered too.
I love it. I love it so much. Well, because that's the thing. I mean, like before I started doing this, these people, I think it's different depending where you are. But in North America, there's such vast distances between people that it's like, you're only ever seeing people through their book form or on interviews or on stage. In the UK, everybody's getting sloshed all the time with each other. But over in North America, the distances are different. Oh, I've heard stories. Actually, a load of them are getting drunk in Glastonbury right now that I know. So.
And here I am over in another hemisphere like a schmuck.
Oh, I know. What are we doing? I mean, I'm only drinking water.
And my whiskey and coke is practically nothing but water right now. So, and I am highly jealous of. See, we could just do something like that over here in North America. We could meet somewhere like Salem and just get completely blitzed. Uh,
That
we
would be
know people all over this hemisphere.
people. It's true. It's true. No, it's true. So then, last question on that. Then, kind of being somebody who has interviewed everybody, knows seemingly everybody. What is it like for you then? Kind of looking back to where you started a decade-ish ago.
The person I see a decade-ish ago was I was one of those people who carried a lot of baggage. And I was one of those people who would drop the baggage and get really angry. And I see the evolution and I see the maturity. And I see that in a lot of relationships I've developed walking this path. And they've seen the evolution as well. As somebody who carried a lot of scars from abuse, who carried a lot of scars from like a crazy childhood. And just to see a person that has learned to keep the lessons but leave the pain behind. Does that mean I don't have problems? Does that mean I don't have trials and tribulations? Absolutely not. It's not about learning how to control the weather. It's not learning how to control the sea. It's learning how to sail.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Yeah. And that's one thing witchcraft teaches you. Witchcraft doesn't teach you to turn people into frogs and hex and curse the person who ate your snack pack and in the office. It teaches you a lens through which to interpret the world that also feeds your soul.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love that. I love that image of sailing. It doesn't give you the direction, but it gives you the ability to travel to that direction.
Any direction you want to go.
Yeah. Yeah. I really resonate with that myself. Well, Erin, we're coming up to time. How can people find you? How can people find you if they want to know more about the show? If they've not come across your show before, where can they go? Do you have a Facebook? Do you have a website? Where can they find you?
I am thoroughly addicted to Instagram. I am more of an Instagrammer than I am a Facebooker, but I hang out with Facebook. But I hang out on Facebook a lot to talk to people like you and my friends all over the place. But you can find me on Instagram at Eron ERON underscore Mazza MAZZA 84. That's my Instagram, and you can find my podcast anywhere you listen to your podcast: Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher.
Anchor
There's
FM, all of those. Yeah, all of the ones that they
yes,
connect with. Yeah.
Anchor
As
FM. I am out there,
okay,
and I
and
am
that is
haraining witches. Like yourself.
Well, I'm deeply honored to, first of all, to have met you and been introduced to you, and to call you a fast friend. I will place all of those socials down below. Thank you so much for joining me on a Friday night. Of course, people watching this will be seeing it on Tuesday, but we're sharing our Friday night together, so I really appreciate that. Thank you, Eron.
We are. You should have brought a stronger drink so it'd be like we're in a bar.
I, yeah, I should have. I apologize. I'll go and grab one afterwards.
You better make up for lost time.
I will. I will definitely will. So, Eron, thank you so much for coming on the show again. I didn't check who's on my show after this. So, check out next Tuesday after you've watched this
Doesn't
episode.
matter.
Yes, all of the other people, they're just downhill from here, you know.
Oh, you're like, where can I get any guests on the show now?
I'm actually okay. I'm curious now. Who do I have coming on to you? Coming on to you. Who do I have coming after you? Let's
Besides you.
Here. We did say this episode was after hours, you're right? The gay community, you can never keep them down. Let's see.
The only thing you can't keep down.
It's true. No, it's true. So after you, we have Matthew Venus. So Matthew Venus is coming on. So yes, Matthew Venus, who is going to come and talk to us about Spiritus Arcanum and the folklore festival that is going on the first week of August.
That's amazing. I would like to make it up there for that because I've heard about the folklore festival, and I've just been so scared to go to like festivals where there's going to be lots of people.
And you don't have to worry because this is all online. It will be entirely online this year. Or the past couple of years have been online. So I will put that link down below. So yeah, I'm really stoked about it. I'm presenting a couple of the other guests that I have on the summer series you're presenting. A load of people you know are presenting. So it's going to be
I want to be like y'all when I grow up.
You'll never grow up. You'll never.
At least on the inside, I never will. I want to grow up and present it stuff too.
You can do whatever you want. You can do whatever you want. 25-year-old Eron, you can do whatever you want.
It's only a matter of time before I am.
It's true. It's true. When you get hair on your chest, right?
Well, I got there in third grade. Well, it's shaved right now because I was wearing a heart monitor. But I am Italian. I was born with a mustache.
And Sicilian, the best part of Italy, too.
It is. It's just kind of like, and where a lot of you normies and other types of Europeans out there didn't get facial hair until your mid to late 20s. I got it in third grade.
I love that. Oh my God, we're going to keep going on and on. But there's an old joke about Sicilian women. That they start out as women and transition later in life, and then they give comfort and support, right?
Exactly.
I know it's horrible, but it's true.
But I have plenty of stories about my mom, but we'll save that for whenever I'm on the show again.
Yes, we will end this before I get in trouble for some things that are coming out of my mouth. Eron, it is so lovely to have you on the show. Thank you so much. Go and check out Eron's podcast. Go and check out all of the amazing interviews with people like David Salisbury, Storm, the whole pantheon of writers you have on there. Who do you have next, like in next coming weeks? Who do you have coming up?
Let's see. I actually have one of the ghost hunters from A&E is going to be on my show.
That's cool. Michelle Belanger?
No, it is Daryl Masterson who's going to be on my show. Okay. Big Beard Daryl. Mm-hmm. And he's going to be talking about his book that he has coming out through Llewellyn. It is about I can't think of the title right now because #alcohol, but it's about a investigation he did that like rattled him to his core. And so it was definitely one of the more heavier episodes that like I've done. And then after that, I am interviewing, excuse me, I'm trying not to burp and talk at the same time and it's not working out. But I am interviewing another gentleman in the UK whose name is Chris. And I would look on my cell phone, but it's in use right now.
Is it Chris Lamb?
I think so. He wrote a book about druidry.
Oh, Christopher Hughes.
Yes, Christopher Hughes.
Yes, Christopher
We've been trying to
Hughes.
coordinate schedules and stuff like that.
I
And I'm so
know.
glad I've got him coming on. And I'm
Yeah.
also interviewing a person out of Tennessee who
Okay.
writes queer horror.
Oh, that's interesting. Oh, that's
It
interesting.
is. It's
Okay.
kind of outside the wheelhouse. And I'm interviewing with my occasional co-host Vince on that one.
Okay, so those are the episodes coming up. Go and check those out. Christopher actually just had on I interviewed Chris the other day before he went to Glastonbury, but my episode's coming out sometime in August, so it's a little bit longer. So go and check out that interview on Eron's show, The Witching Hour of Eron Mazza. And Eron, I'm going to stop because we'll just keep going and going and going. But I really appreciate this. Thank you so much.
The pleasure was all mine.
Have a good night, folks. Bye bye.